Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Northwest Territories in Canada, to the Mackenzie Mountains. The Mackenzies are a northern aspect of the eastern Canadian Rocky Mountains and are part of a stretch of wilderness called the North Woods. The North Woods is an uninterrupted coniferous forest stretching from Alaska to the Atlantic Ocean. The Mackenzies are made of 4 ranges, including the Ogilvie, Wernicke, Canyon, and Backbone ranges, and are drier than mountains in British Columbia. In these ranges, alpine tundra dominates higher elevations, while subalpine open woodlands dominate the valley bottoms. Plant life here has a broad range and form. They include lichens and sedge grasses, with stunted white spruce and alpine fir, mixed in with willow and dwarf birch trees. Animal life here is abundant and diverse. Visitors may see caribou, Dall's sheep, or moose, depending on how high up the mountain you look. The predators here include black bears, wolves, and grizzly bears. This area is pristine wilderness, and people visiting here may not have a full understanding of the risks they assume while doing so. In the 3rd week of September 2014, 53-year-old Ken Novotny traveled to Norman Wells in the Mackenzies for a moose hunt. He was an avid outdoorsman and regularly traveled here each fall in pursuit of whatever animal Mother Nature may provide for him. He was the managing director for Raymond James Financial in Memphis, Tennessee, and lived in Germantown, a suburb outside of Memphis. A few days into his moose hunt on the 14th of September, Ken's guide, whom we'll call John, helped him locate a good-sized bull moose. The men observed it from a distance before deciding to stalk closer to it and see if they could get within shooting range. After a short stalk, the shadows were beginning to stretch a bit, so Ken and John decided it was now or tomorrow, if they were lucky. Ken leveled his hunting rifle on the bull's massive chest and fired a single shot, bringing the hunt to a humane and satisfying ending. Now I bet I know what you're thinking. How does a person even begin to gut an animal the size of a moose? Well, I've harvested both of my moose available to me here in Idaho. I remember the first moose I shot was a young bull. After the bull fell, I approached him and almost panicked with the feeling of dread. This animal was enormous. It seemed to be the size of a horse and was very difficult to move or get into position to gut, and that was on a flat forest floor. After gutting the moose, I marveled at the basketball-sized heart and liver that was about 30 inches long and weighed approximately 20 pounds or so. My roommate and I ate liver until we were sick of it, and now Ken was dealing with the same rigors of success. As Ken and John fought the moose carcass into position to be gutted, their attention was focused on the task at hand. They planned to gut the moose and pack it out over a series of hikes, and had considered leaving part of its carcass for packing the next day. An easy tip for gutting any animal is to point the rear end downhill, and when the entrails weigh about 300 pounds, any help you can get is welcome. A moose has about 32 pints of blood, compared to 8 to 10 pints in a human. Sending a speeding bullet through a moose's lungs sends out a spray of an unknown portion of blood that aerosolizes into the air. The added scent of blood and other bodily fluids pouring out of its wounds only increases the olfactory bombardment of any nearby predator with a keen sense of smell. As Ken tugged and slashed at the entrails of the moose, the odors of the offal of the animal permeated the area. It didn't help that the stand of trees the moose had collapsed within provided a very limited field of view. Usually when a hunter is dressing a game animal in bear country, his hunting partner should position himself at an elevated vantage point with as clear a view as possible. I could find no source that indicated where John was in relation to Ken and the moose carcass, but the events that unfolded next would have been very difficult to anticipate. With all of Ken's attention on the moose carcass, John saw a huge grizzly bear bolt from the nearby scrub pines. It only had to cover a few yards to reach Ken, having so stealthily crept upon him. John was powerless to react as the bear ran up to Ken. With a single swipe of its massive paw, it sent Ken flying. Before Novotny hit the ground, the bear spun on its heels, as if it was surprised to see people instead of other bears. The grizzly had disappeared into the brush by the time John could make his way to Novotny. The width of the grizzly's paws imparted crushing force over the length of Ken's skull. He had no chance at survival and died instantly from the bear's only paw swipe. John was not hurt by the bear and now had to find a way to contact authorities so they could reclaim Ken's corpse. It isn't clear whether he used a cell phone or a satellite phone, but somehow he reached out to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police about 9:30 p.m. that night. The Mounties rounded up the coroner and wildlife officials, but were prevented from accessing the location due to inclement weather. The following morning, Thursday, September 15th, the investigation into the fatal grizzly mauling of Ken Novotny was initiated. One of the first steps investigators do on fatal bear attacks is to exclude foul play, or the potential of it. Ken's injuries were clearly done by a bear. Foul play was ruled out, and now they knew they had a man-killer on their hands. As Ken's attack site was analyzed and his corpse removed, a search for the grizzly was undertaken. Hunting a grizzly bear is a little like looking for a needle in a needle stack. It's risky, especially when you know the grizzly you are hunting has already killed a man. By Saturday, September 17th, the canvassing turned up an ill-tempered grizzly the investigators considered to be the likely aggressor in Ken's death. They shot the grizzly, and DNA from its carcass was compared to the evidence from Ken's attack site. They killed the grizzly that had taken Ken's life, and removed the potential for it to kill or injure anyone else. The Northwest Territories are home to an estimated population of 4,000 to 5,000 grizzly bears, with most of those living in the Mackenzie and Richardson Mountains. 4 people have been killed in bear attacks there, all since 1998. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think this grizzly was a dinner bell bear, or did it follow its nose to Ken's location? Was the bear surprised when it found people at the moose carcass, or did it know the hunters were there? Why did the bear flee after the fatal swipe on Novotny? How could John have been better prepared for a grizzly bear to appear so suddenly? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the Elk River Valley of southeast British Columbia, Canada. The Elk River Valley runs at around 4,000 feet, with peaks surrounding it stretching a little over 9,000 feet in elevation. This area has a humid continental climate with snowy winters and warm summers with occasional rain. The Kootenay Mountains are made up of the Rockies, Purcells, Selkirks, and Menashe ranges, and take up the entire southeast portion of British Columbia. In the Kootenays, there are 4 national and 75 provincial parks, providing an indication of the area's wild beauty. Forest-covered mountains hold lakes beset like topaz jewels, surrounded by old-growth temperate rainforests, with wildflower-covered alpine meadows. It is a beautiful place, but sometimes the peace of nature is interrupted by some of its crueler realities. The Elk River runs through the town of Elkford and is paralleled on its route by Highway 43. On the south end of town is an industrial park that abuts a clear-cut area of timber that has grown back in dense young pine, fir, and spruce trees. Remnant deadfall makes navigation here perilous at best, and in places nearly impossible. The extensive panel of wildlife include mountain goats and bighorn sheep on the high peaks, with moose, elk, white-tailed, and mule deer wandering the mountainsides. The predators in this area include lynx, wolves, cougars, coyotes, as well as black bears and grizzly bears. It is very common to see wildlife meandering through town, and some animal visitors bring danger to human inhabitants of Elkford. On the afternoon of Thursday, May 17, 2024, a 36-year-old man whom we'll refer to as Dave was hunting with his elderly father, who we will call Steve. Dave was a resident of a nearby town called Sparwood, and both men were avid outdoorsmen. Hunting was a favorite pastime, and both enjoyed being in the woods whenever they had the chance. The father and son were hunting black bears with dogs, and had found themselves on the trail of a promising specimen around 2 p.m. on the hillside above the industrial park on the south side of Elkford. The bear's trail meandered through the young growth of evergreens, frequently called jack pines. These patches of young trees grow closely together, and because they are only 10 to 15 feet tall, their limbs are closer to the ground than full-grown trees. This limits visibility to just a few feet in places, and creates an environment where close-range surprises are almost unavoidable. The steep terrain was more difficult for Steve, so he lagged behind Dave and the dogs. As the dogs trailed the black bear's scent, they stumbled upon an adult grizzly bear that was nearby. Even though the dogs were not trailing this particular bear, they did what dogs do and closed in on the bear. As soon as the dogs saw the grizzly, their mission abruptly changed, and there wasn't much Dave could do about it. The grizzly reacted with instinct to the presence of dogs and attacked them, but continued a route taking it toward Dave as it did so. Having only a few seconds to react, Dave shouldered his hunting rifle and fired a round into the bear before it closed in on him and took him down. Though it was wounded, the grizzly unleashed a torrent of bites and paw strikes on Dave as he screamed for help. Here's where a little information about the toughness of a grizzly bear is needed to understand Dave's attack. Founder and owner of the Canadian Bear Safety Authority, John Clark, indicates that a grizzly bear shot through the heart can be so adrenalized that it can still attack for 6 to 7 seconds before succumbing to its wounds, and that is if you hit it in the heart. He's investigated 14 bear maulings over 16 years, and is the coordinator of the Karelian Bear Dog Unit of the province of Alberta, so his insights are extremely valuable. The grizzly attacked Dave for only a few seconds, but managed to break bones, impart puncture wounds on his arms and legs, as well as gash his body with its claws in several locations. For such a brief attack, it was astoundingly devastating. The grizzly's vicious attack ended abruptly when it turned and dashed off into the thick tangle of young evergreens and deadfall. Now disabled on the ground, Dave began yelling for his father. Steve stumbled and tripped his way through the obstacles and knelt down at his son's side. Even though they were only 550 yards from the nearest road, it might as well have been 20 miles with the difficulty the terrain presented. Moving Dave was out of the question, given his father's age and Dave's injuries. Steve knew his only hope of finding help for his son was to try to reach someone by way of his cell phone. Despite being in rugged country crowded with trees, being close to Elkford was helpful in one way. Cell service was abundant, and he reached the 911 dispatcher by 3 p.m. His plea for help set off a flurry of responses from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Elkford Fire Department, British Columbia Ambulance Service, and conservation officers. First responders arrived at Dave's attack site and quickly realized the perils of moving him up the tangled and steep hillside. After assessing the situation, they coordinated a long-line rescue with STARS Air Ambulance Service out of Calgary. The air ambulance retrieved Dave and flew him to Calgary's Foothills Hospital, about 80 miles to the north as the crow flies. Dave was treated for several lacerations and scrapes, as well as numerous broken bones, but was listed in stable condition soon after initial treatment. His wounds would require suturing, and surgery may be required to mend his bones, but those reports are still forthcoming. As for the bear, investigators returned to Dave's attack site to search for it. They knew they had a wounded grizzly on their hands, that had already attacked one person, and finding it was of the utmost importance. By 9 p.m. the same evening of the attack, the grizzly's dead carcass was found several yards away from the initial attack site. Apparently, the shot from Dave's firearm was fatal to the grizzly, just not quite soon enough to prevent his attack. The investigation on Dave's bear attack now focused on if he was hunting this grizzly or was merely attacked by it while hunting a black bear. British Columbia banned grizzly bear hunting in 2017, so doing so would impose heavy fines and punishment on the hunters. In 2020, a year-long investigation of bear poaching near Elkford caught a local man baiting black bears. Despite not apprehending the poacher in the act, they erected a black bear decoy at the illicit bait site. The poacher returned and shot at the decoy, giving the officers reason to apprehend him in 2021. They found that the man had also poached a grizzly bear and harvested parts of the bear at the same bait site. The poacher received a $10,000 fine and lost his hunting privileges. The RCMP indicates that bear incident reports spike between the months of May and September each year. This is the season when more people venture into the backcountry, as black bears and grizzly bears search for food, defend their territory from each other, and rear their cubs. Parks Canada indicates that there are only 9 to 16 grizzly bears in the Kootenays, and 30 to 50 black bears. With populations being this low, the likelihood of an attack is almost zero. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Would this bear attack have happened if the dogs hadn't been present? Would it have been worse if Dave hadn't shot the bear? Would bear spray have prevented this attack? Are you surprised at how few bears live around Elkford? I thought there would be a lot more than Parks Canada indicated. I will gladly read and respond to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to a surprising location, Newcastle, Colorado. Elevations here start at around 5,500 feet in the valleys, and soar to over 8,000 feet high on the ridges to the north of town. The climate here is a Mediterranean climate, with warm, dry summers and mild, wet winters. There's an average of 310 days of sunshine here, designating Newcastle as one of the sunniest places in the state. Summers usually range into the 80s with nights cooling off dramatically. The winters range from 20 to 30 degrees and drop into the single digits at night. With only 15 inches of rain each year, the several miles of sagebrush surrounding the town make it an unlikely location for a bear attack. But then again, if bears followed rules, there wouldn't be so many bear attacks. Common animals here include mule deer and a healthy elk population, which can be viewed grazing and browsing their way across hillsides around town. The predators here include bobcats, cougars, coyotes, and black bears. In the Castle Valley Ranch neighborhood, black bears have been spotted on occasion. The locals here have grown to tolerate and even appreciate the bear's presence, as they bring their cubs into nearby hillsides and open areas. The black bears here have never exhibited aggressive tendencies toward humans until recently. On August 31st, 2022, Akasha Jensen was house-sitting for some friends of hers in Castle Valley Ranch on the north side of the small town. Along with her was her 7-year-old terrier mix, whom we will call Rex. About 2 a.m., Akasha looked out the window in the backyard and noticed the insulated lid on the hot tub was ajar. She decided she would step out onto the patio and set it straight before going to bed for the evening. As Akasha stepped outside, Rex raced past her to the base of a small group of aspen trees in the backyard. He barked vociferously as Akasha called repeatedly to him. What Akasha didn't know was that a sow black bear had been wandering the neighborhood with 3 of her cubs. The bears had likely been searching for food in neighborhood bird feeders, or digging through trash bins to find leftovers. While Akasha pushed the hot tub lid into place, the sow black bear stormed from the tree and raced toward her. Akasha had nowhere to go, and tried to run into the house, but the sow intercepted her midway, and knocked her to the concrete on the patio. In a prolonged attack that Akasha estimated lasted for 5 minutes, the sow managed to impart deep purple scratches to her back and gash her left arm and shoulder with its claws. The bear bit onto her upper left arm and punched several puncture wounds into her bicep and tricep. That is when Rex raced back into the fray. He dashed and barked at the bear in a flurry of gnashing teeth and confusing aggression. The sow was befuddled by the dog's boldness and decided to focus on her cubs. During Rex's brilliant defense of Akasha, the bear released its grip on her upper arm and allowed her to climb back to her feet. She used the distraction to dash into the home and call Rex to her side. Akasha dialed 911 and requested that authorities arrive to take care of the bears, as well as medical responders to take care of her wounds. As the Newcastle police searched the neighborhood around 3 a.m., they located the sow and the 3 cubs near the attack site. Initially, they weren't sure just how many of the bears were involved in Akasha's attack and how much of a disruption they wanted to cause to residents. The tree they were located in was near a busy road and private residences. If they injure one of the bears, they may be creating a dangerous situation for people. Colorado Parks and Wildlife were consulted on how to handle the sow and cubs. They instructed the police to shoot and kill the sow. Following these instructions, the sow was killed while in a tree, and one of her cubs was shot and killed as well. During the confusion, 2 of the cubs bolted from the tree and ran toward a nearby middle school. Colorado Parks and Wildlife officers responded to the school and investigated the cubs. It was decided that they didn't participate in Akasha's attack, given they had no blood on their claws or muzzles. The wildlife officers sedated the 2 remaining cubs and recovered them until they could decide what to do with them. Following the attack, Akasha was taken to a hospital in Glenwood Springs, where her injuries were cleaned. Sutures were used to close her gashes and puncture wounds in her left arm before she was released to heal at home. Akasha is expected to make a full recovery from her physical injuries, but the mental impact of such a surprising attack will take more time to get over. Regarding Rex, no injuries to the dog were reported by any source. The attack resulted in 2 bears being shot and killed and 2 remaining cubs being confined to a wildlife rehabilitation facility. Adding in the injuries sustained to Akasha, this attack was devastating in many ways, and on many levels. After reviewing the details of this attack, I'm left with a few questions for you. Do you think Rex played a contributing role in this attack? Would the sow have done more serious damage to Akasha had Rex not been there? Are you surprised that a sow black bear and 3 cubs would inhabit an area surrounded by sagebrush? The next time you are enjoying time outside, will this attack make you think twice about venturing into the dark? I know that it will make me think twice. I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.